Well, welcome everyone for the first webinar of the year. We do this every 3 months, 2 to 3 months. Well, this one is an important one. It's the 2025 results, which we'll cover, and then followed by the first forecast for 26. So we'll start it off with Frank, who will do a few words on the GTDC, and then hand it over to Anthony.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. And I guess good afternoon to mostly everybody on the call. There's a few of us here that's still morning, but good afternoon, and it's great to have everybody. And I want to thank the Context team again for doing these with us. As Peter said, this call is one that we're all looking forward to, year-end 2025, final results, and also the 2026 forecast, among some other things. So I'll let Anthony cover all of that for you. Before I turn it over, there's 2 things that I want to mention. One is the North America Summit event that we have every year in Oceanside, California. We have a few European attendees coming. And then the one that's probably likely more important to everybody on this call is we will have our European event April 14th and 15th in Nordvik. And we're really looking forward to that event. Registration is open. So if you haven't registered yet, go ahead and do so. And we'd love to see you there. It's going to be another excellent event with networking opportunities, as well as really good content. So with that, Anthony, let me pass it on to you for an overview of all the things we're waiting to hear.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, wherever you are in the world. So today, as Frank and Peter mentioned, we will review 2025, looking at the last quarter and what it means for the full picture. And most importantly, the 2026 forecast that we just presented earlier today. So if you were with us earlier today, that's going to be a similar story, but with a little twist to bring something different. So let's review 2025. 2025, one of the key buzzwords in the distribution channel was end of support for Windows 10 and PC refresh. So it will be interesting to see how this all pan out in 2025. Let's start by looking at our monthly result, especially focusing on the last 3 months. And what we can see is we finish the year on a bang with 9.1% year-over-year in December 2025. Great result. If to highlight some key highlights in December, in Poland, we had this huge education framework on the mobile computing side. And just if you're all sitting down, mobile computing in Poland in December, triple-digit growth, 158%. So well done for whoever was involved in the tenders. Some great numbers then. In mobile computing, that was also a great story in France. It's been a bit slow in France on mobile computing this year, but in Q4, double-digit growth in October, November, finishing once again on a bang with 26.4% growth in France on mobile computing. But what we've seen across actually the December result is also some deals that have been pulled in December in anticipation of the price hikes that will come up this year in 2026. Still limited, we don't want to overstock, etc. But we've seen when talking to our partner, to vendors, etc., we've seen a few of these deals happening in December as well. And of course, behind this 9.1, that's been the star of the distribution for the past few years now is software, finishing at 11.8%. But I think let's look now what it means that quarterly view and full year 2025. As expecting, with this number by months, we could see that Q4 was the largest, the more strongest quarter result for quite a while, and especially this year. So for 2025, we finished at 5.2% growth. incredible results, something we haven't seen since the pandemic, since this 2020. So really something incredible that have been happening this year, or last year rather, on the distribution channel here in Europe. So let's split that into our traditional volume and value split to really see the picture of volume rising through the year, finishing 6 and 5% in the second half of the year to finish around 4.5% for the full year. While value, you see starting the year strongly, but we have a little dip in Q3 for those who were not there last year. It was mainly due to some big deals that happened in Q3 2024 on virtualization. Remember, it used to be like the triple digit growth in virtualization, like 150% we've seen in 2024. So that's why we were more modest this time, and that explained the dip in Q3 at 1% here. But nonetheless, value picked up in Q4 to finish strongly the year at 6% and overall 5.9% for the full year 2025. I think it will be even more interesting if we drill that down a level below to look at our top sector and to see here the clear impact on the PC refresh. If we look at the personal system here, the purple line, great Q4 at 14%, but even throughout the year, ramping up acceleration throughout the year of the Windows end of support that was the driver of this PC refresh. So great performance, of course, from notebook. We've seen that, we talk about it, but something that keeps surprising us months after months was the other PC category, desktop. Desktop that finished the year at 27% growth. So incredible to see the desktop activities in the distribution channel in Europe. So it was not only about the notebook finishing around 10%, but also the desktop. So personal system at 12%, but the star of the distribution channel once again this year, leading our top sector. If we look at this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 top sector, software and services represent 28% of the distribution panel in Europe. And once again, another double-digit growth, 13%, backed by a software category that I keep mentioning quarter after quarter on this call, or month after month, or week after week, wherever you talk to me, it's virtualization. Virtualization in Q3, I said, was a slowdown with a difficult year-on-year compare, but in Q4, 27% growth year-over-year. We'll see this on the vendor impacted by that beyond this growth later on. But virtualization finishing at 37% in 2025, taking this category from last year. In software category, it was a number 4, and now growing to number 2 in our distribution panel. And who is in number 1 in the software is security, high topic this year, high topic for next year. We'll see that in a forecast as well. Security software finishing strong with a 10% year-over-year in 2025. If we look at infrastructure, modest growth, but infrastructure, there is a lot of category beyond this. There is, in one hand, server that been doing so great. I think it's 17% for this year. And server is divided in, as we know, into category. You have the AI market, has been so positive throughout the year. We see some huge deal happening in the UK, for example, or in the Nordics. We've seen some great activities there. But nonetheless, the core and more traditional market still that was due for a long overdue refresh, actually, since before the pandemic. We've seen that have been taking place throughout the quarter. Every quarter, double digits growth for this core traditional server. A bit of a slowdown in Q4, where we see just a 2% growth, but nonetheless quite positive in the infrastructure side for the server. And that's something that we cannot say for other category in this top sector, such as networking, that once again been down by 4%. We always expect the refresh of the infrastructure. We always expect Wi-Fi 7 to take over, but we've seen people happy with what they have or not willing to change until everything breaks. So that's why networking going down. And similar story for storage last year in distribution. The storage, like server, is a story of two categories. You have storage associated with the AI data center space have been doing well, but the core and traditional legacy model and legacy system not still being refreshed last year. So still storage down 2.5% in the infrastructure space. Thanks to AI and data center space, it could have been much lower. If we look at peripheral, finally, another difficult year, but we always knew it will be the case. It was a year of the PC refresh budget, more on this, more on AI, and less on the peripheral side, with still the use it until it break, asset sweating taking place in this sector. And -1. And finally, telecom. We see last year we had some huge deal happening in distribution for smartphone that we didn't see over this year, finishing at -3%. But overall, still plus 5.2% in distribution, incredible performance. And so let's look by country. That's something I like to show. And the star of the year, definitely in Europe, was Spain. Spain, quarter after quarter, finishing the year at 15% growth. If you remember, there was this digital initiative kit initiative that happened here that enabled acceleration on the mobile computing refresh and any other category, to be honest. But it finished in October. But what happened in the end of Q4, it was the sales from distribution to corporate reseller climbing 25% year over year across all categories. So the corporate reseller waking up in Spain toward the end of the year, across server, across software, across LFD, across warranty and services. So really all across a lot of category, helping Spain finish a strong 15%. Another double-digit country pushed by another government initiative and the educational framework I've been mentioning earlier. In Poland, we'll see like the Q4 16% growth, helping Poland finishing on just above 10%. And finally, another region with double-digit growth, incredible results in the Nordics, supported, as I said, with infrastructure deals that we saw throughout the year in Sweden, in Norway, in Denmark, and in Finland as well, but also the growth in software and in mobile computing. That's double-digit growth. There is still good news for the other country. Let's start with Germany, the largest market in Europe. Finally turning the corner. Remember 2024, Germany was down, -3%. And finally, we've seen with the election year, more optimism this year in business confidence. And we're finishing at 3.3. So great start, great year for Germany. Another activities that have been picking up in the second half of the year, I mentioned earlier, that was France, a great momentum that we see accelerating in Q4. And we'll see that also in our forecast later. And there is more disappointing performance in the UK that could have been way worse if this big AI deal didn't happen in the UK, and it would have been more similar to what's happening in Italy. Italy a bit struggling, business confidence a bit low, and finishing the year just flat or -0.4%. So struggling in Italy, in the UK as well, but great news in Germany and Spain, Poland, and the Nordics. One slide that I know a lot of you on this call love, because I received a lot of email after to share that quickly, is vendor analysis. So divided this time, we look at volume vendors and see who has been performing well in terms of revenue, but year-on-year growth. Apple still number one in our distribution panel, but the growth this year, it's not a surprise to anyone on this call. And since we've been talking about Windows refresh, to see the PC vendor above 10% year-on-year growth. That's the Dell, the Lenovo, the Asus, the Acer, great performance for these vendors. HP also, of course, with the PC side, but below the 10% because impacted by the weak performance on the print side for HP. The print side not doing so well, as we can see with the performance of Canon, Brother, and Epson, only Brother above in positive territory. Another difficult year for the print market. One thing to highlight as well is the incredible growth of the AMD in our panel, distribution panel. Here, growing at close to 35%, and it's mainly the processor going through from distribution to retail and retailer. So great performance here in AMD before they're gonna all switch to data center. But now very interesting to see this. That would be interesting to see that next year. Actually, that's what I should have done next year, remember. Let's look at the volume, the value side. Value side, no surprise to see the great performance of the software vendor, starting with Microsoft with this Office application renewal and growing close to 20%. But once again, virtualization, the VMware, the Citrix, etc., great double-digit growth there. On the security side, for the Fortinet, the Checkpoint as well. A bit more difficult for the networking side. I know maybe the route to market is a bit different, but Cisco a bit down, as well as NetApp. HP, on the other side, on hardware, doing quite well. We've seen this big AI deal happening in Europe. HP very well positioned on this side. And interestingly, let's look at the far right, Huawei. To go back here, it's been difficult for the Chinese manufacturer in this environment, but strong performance, okay, maybe from a lower base to the other vendors, but doing well in power equipment and also in networking, wireless access point. So interesting picture, software vendor dominating this year once again. So what does that mean for 2026? As I mentioned, we just published a number like a couple of hours ago. We did our webinar a couple of hours ago. So 2025, as I mentioned, year of the PC refresh. 2026, maybe less exciting news because it's really what we keep hearing, having call with everyone, is a memory crisis year. As you know, it's well documented. The memory manufacturers, the Samsung, the SK Hynix, starting to pivoting from providing traditional high volume models to distribution to pivoting to more high margin AI driven production. So really to provide memory and high bandwidth memory to the hyperscaler to build the AI data center. And as we know, every wafer that go to AI data center is a wafer that's not going into our other IT category. So that will have an impact on pricing, on supply, and we're already actually seeing the impact on the pricing. So before going into the forecast, there is something I wanted to spend a bit more time on, something we launched yesterday in our weekly forum that we have every week, where we, context, we track sales, unit revenue, but we also track price. And we decided to put this little index together to really highlight the rise of component prices. Here we look at RAM, and what does this index mean? So we look at index with a base 100 from, we look at the revenue happening, for the price happening in July, August, and September. Yes, that was a base 100. And you can see the acceleration in November and December, once Samsung and SK Hynix were more vocal about where the production of wafer will go. Incredible rise here of the price from a base 100 to like close to 200 for some country, impacting RAM. I don't have the January number, but if you want to know more, please get in touch and we will have that in an upcoming week. That impact RAM, this memory crisis, but it also impacts other categories. For example, here we started with SSD. Also, it's just on the consumer side. We are building more indices for you to see on the consumer side, to see other components as well. But still, similar trend. Quite acceleration of price increase in the last couple of months in 2025. And we know all these components will have an impact on the PC vendors as well. We've been hearing during all the financial results, the impact and the price increase that they are planning throughout the year. But when we look at the first few weeks of the year, so on the first 4 weeks compared to the last 4 weeks, we see, okay, desktop growing slightly, but notebook on a decrease. That could be surprising, but like here we look at the overall distribution panel, so including a lot, it's an average as well, so there is some mix of education product as well, but still interesting trend to see this going down. But I should have put that in red for the time being, because what we will see is price increase. We know we hear 10-20% price increase in coming up in the next few quarters, starting in Q2 most likely. So in this context of this memory crisis, what does that mean for our forecast this year? A tricky exercise in this volatile environment, but nonetheless, let's look at our forecast for 2026. And we are quite positive, still positive at 2.1% for 2026. We know what we like to do is look at GDP forecast as well. For EU 27, even the UK is around 1.4 to 1.2. So above the GDP forecast, that's where distribution usually tend to be. So quite positive, still positive. It's going to be difficult to obviously replicate what happened last year, but nonetheless, let's enjoy this positive growth of the forecast that we're doing. But the story really is going to be looking at the quarterly number. The year will start with still this positive momentum in client computing, the tail end of the PC refresh, the Windows 10 refresh. And we still see like the supply chain still operating with the cost structure of 2025, with the stock of 2025. So we don't see the full impact of the component shortage yet. But that's something that may turn in Q2 or maybe in end of Q1 and Q2, when the memory crisis will begin to impact the availability and the price, but we'll still think a growth of 1%. And toward the end of the year, a more robust 2% point growth in Q3, in Q4. And to understand where does this growth come from in the second part, let's once again look at our volume value split. We can see here the growth will be coming once again from the value categories. The volume will be decreasing throughout the year, finishing in negative territory in Q4. So volume will finish around 1% in 2026, while value will be at 4% in 2026, with a strong growth in the second half of the year. But once again, I think we should look a level deeper to get a better story on, first of all, on the personal system. The PC refresh will still be impacting the number in Q1, in Q2. There's also some educational framework happening in Europe, especially in Italy, in Q1 that will help boost this number. But it will be that will be a decrease throughout the year on personal system, finishing the year for FY26 around 3% for personal system. This is in revenue, because if we look in units, obviously that will be way worse than this. But thanks to the price rise, we should be finishing the year on a positive note. But that will be it's still also very difficult for us to understand what will be really the impact on the high price to the demand. I know it will be depend on the type of customer, but that's something we will keep an eye on our upcoming forecasts and talking to you on this call and our various conversations to understand how you see the market as well evolving. A slow decline in the personal system. On the peripheral, we've all been waiting for the refresh to happen on this top sector since the pandemic. Will come at some point. We're still quite not so optimistic at 1% on our midpoint. Usually we do like optimistic and pessimistic scenarios. So here our midpoint around the 1% in peripheral. But as I mentioned, thanks to more value category, the software infrastructure, especially software, keep being the growth engine of the distribution channel. Finish the year at or around 4% for software and services this year. And the infrastructure, there was some huge deal in Q2 last year, so that's why you can see this dip in infrastructure. What is interesting and what we hope is maybe networking to be less bad than it used to be, and maybe close to growth or zero or flat. So that will help infrastructure growing as well, or not going down so much. But what's interesting in the infrastructure and the software services, and that's something we just launched earlier today, our first cybersecurity forecast. I don't have the slide yet because it's still embargo, but I can share with you the key story, because cybersecurity is both hardware and both software, so both in between infrastructure and services. And we will see an acceleration in H2 this year. H2 2025 was not so good, but we should see double-digit growth in the second half of the year, and overall a year around 7.7% for cybersecurity. And what are the key drivers behind this? I think we have two main key drivers. First, digital sovereignty. What we've been seeing a bit more is increasing demand for EU vetted vendors to be available in a security stack. And that will impact, obviously, great opportunity for the channel, great opportunity for EU vendor. We'll see also, like last week, a couple of weeks in France, what we call the digital divorce, where European authority trying to go more with local vendor and stop their US vendors being available. So we see that in France with their dropping Teams, dropping Zoom. So that will be interesting, this digital sovereignty, to see how it impacts the channel. Hopefully a great opportunity for everyone on this call. Another driver in cybersecurity as well is all the regulation. The NIS2, the DORA, the upcoming EU AI Act. That will, last year it was a lot of planning around this, but this year is more enforcement. So we need to get ready. We need to make sure we are aligned with the regulation. So an opportunity there, but at the same time, what we see, especially in Europe, in the EU, too much regulation will also mean making sure audits are done properly. So we could see some budget, instead of being allocated to investing in security, invested in legal and consulting compliances. So that would be interesting to follow that in cybersecurity. So interesting for us to be able to drill down in cybersecurity. Sorry, I couldn't share the slide. Maybe when I send the presentation, I will be able to add a couple of this. But let's finish now on country picture. And what's good, and that's what I alluded earlier in the presentation, is Germany. Germany from -3 in 2024, positive this year. We still see some great economic headwinds for Germany to finish at 5% this year. Lots of talk, and of course, on the mobile computing refresh, that still need to happen a bit more in Germany. But it's also on the cybersecurity and big infrastructure happening over there, deal happening over there in Germany. So quite positive for the largest economy in Europe, 5%. Similar story in France as well. The momentum that we've seen toward the end of last year, we see that continuing already in the beginning of this year, but we'll still be positive and closing at 4%. Less positive for UK. In Italy, still struggling. Business confidence not being the greatest in Italy, as I mentioned earlier. SMB still struggling, so we should be 1 or -1 or 1 flat for these two countries. Similarly, in Poland, that's going to be difficult to replicate what we've seen this year. The education framework has happened, so we should be towards flat in Poland. But on the positive news, still, Spain growing again, once again, on the back of a 15% growth, still positive. Cybersecurity, a huge driver as well in Spain, and software as well. So Spain, we are quite a bit, despite the difficulty year-on-year compare, with 3% growth, and similar to the Nordics. And actually, the Nordics is reflecting what we're going to see throughout this year through the distribution channel. Start of the year strong on the PC. Second half of the year strong in infrastructure and security to finish around 3%. So last year, a great 2025 plus 5.2%. Everybody should be happy with this tremendous result. Distribution channel still a great way to do business. Software growing still in the distribution channel. And this year, we will continue software growth, security investment. PC will be a bit more difficult, but nonetheless, we should be at plus 2%. And with that, as Frank mentioned, if you want to meet up, I will be in Oceanside in a couple of weeks because one, I have enough of the rain in the UK and I hope it will be sunny in California, but it's also always a great event to be there in the US and to get different perspective as well. So looking forward to meet some of you there. And if not, please feel free to reach out. Otherwise, I'll see you in Netherlands in April. Thank you.